Last week somebody asked me to make a video about character creation, so in this video I'm going to try to go over some of the main points and touch on some of the struggles that I had, especially starting out with character creation. As with any process in life or in art or in anything that you're doing, it is so difficult just to get started on something. The most important thing to remember for any process is to have a plan. It is your job as an individual to assess your strengths and your weaknesses, and to use them to execute your plan accordingly. The first phase of any project is the blockout phase. For character creation, this means taking each individual piece of anatomy that you are familiar with and breaking it down into a simple shape, and piecing it all together so that you have a blockout form that you can build on top of. This just means appending in a new sphere for every single body part, the hands, the feet, the head, etc. First identify if you're making a human or an animal, or a male or a female character, and identifying the major differences between them, so you can start creating the correct shapes. Some people like to work all across their model all at the same time, which means not refining one piece more than any of the others at any given time. This is a traditional method where you're slowly rendering your entire piece all at once. This is also a very useful technique because it helps you stay focused for a longer period of time, and you don't get hung up on the details too early on and lose focus on your project. This week I did end up working on the head a lot more before I moved on to any of the other parts of the body. This was actually a major problem for me. I kept coming back to the face and saying there was something wrong, there's something off, I couldn't figure out what was wrong, and that's because I wasn't bouncing around my model enough to take my focus off of the face and gain some perspective. Now I added in a basic blockout shape for the hair, and added in a couple of pieces just for some strands to kind of give a little bit more shape. In order to create characters, you need some basic knowledge of anatomy. This doesn't mean you have to master every single piece of the human body. It just means you have to understand the placement and the distance between each part and the sizing and proportions. You don't have to be a master, but you do have to practice. A lot. This means drawing. This means looking at reference while you're working. This means always being aware of what it is that you're trying to create. For a female character, it's important to look up the differences between male and female anatomy, especially on the skull and the face. That really helped me a lot when I got stuck, especially when I couldn't figure out what was wrong with my character's face. When I say practice anatomy, I don't just mean try to draw the whole human body all at once. I mean take each piece individually. Take the nose, take the lips, take the ears, take the eyes, take all of these different pieces and work on them individually, maybe one a day, maybe one a week. Like in my last video, I talked about practicing the right way. I drew the lips, I drew them 5 times, I drew them 5 more times, then I went into Zbrush, sculpted the lips 5 times, sculpted it 5 more times. This is how you get better. Now that your blockout phase is complete, you need to go back to each individual body part and start shaping out those forms. This is where character art is really helpful. Finding the way that people break things down in 2D has always helped me so much. The torso is basically made up of 3 parts. The arms are made up of 2 cylinders. Everything is broken down into super basic shapes, and then you can start refining the main shape from there. Which brings us to our next point, which is the silhouette of your character. Now is the time to make sure that your character is standing up straight, that the hips are placed in the right direction, the chest is pointing out the right way, the shoulders are back. I'm not saying to pose your character yet, that comes later. This is just making sure that all of the body parts flow in the right direction. Now I missed a segment and I skipped over how I made the clothing, but I just did that with a simple mask and extract. That was really easy to get into place. Now I start to bounce all over the model. I start putting in individual strands of hair. I start creating pieces of trimming for the clothing, the buckle on the arm piece. I created the trimming on the clothing by going into Stroke, Curve Functions, and Frame Mesh. Then you can just select your curve tube brush, make the brush radius to something like 12, really small, and just click on any one of those curves and it creates a tube along the curve. The thing to remember is that you're always refining every piece as you go. It's important that you work a little bit on the face, a little bit on the hair, and a little bit on the body, all at different times. Just bounce back and forth and gradually refine with more details. If you have to take a break, that's great. It's actually better to take a break and step back because when you come back to your project, you're going to see the mistakes that you didn't see when you were caught up in it. Now that you've completed the details on most of the body and the face, you want to get into detail with the little things like the hair, the shoes, the clothing. Start to go back and create wrinkles in the clothing. Start to sculpt in tiny differences on things like the shoes, like the seams or the shoelaces. If that starts to get too tedious, go back to the hair and work on that for a little while. You can also throw in more color. You can use poly paint to make your model pop even more. Adding a skin color to the face, adding reds and blues and yellows to get a realistic skin tone, all of these things will help add detail and gradually make your model stand out more. I created most of this character using really simple brushes. My tool palette at the bottom is pretty much everything I use, and I still don't even use all of them. Having a knowledge of Zbrush is absolutely critical, but having a knowledge of what it is that you're trying to create is even more important. If you can't understand it, you can't create it. This is why I'm such an advocate of practice. The more you practice, the better you get. This means creating consistent habits and trying to create all of the individual pieces, and then eventually you can bring them all together to create a whole character. By practicing every day or as often as I could, by breaking down the lips, by breaking down the ears and the nose as individual pieces, and then trying to draw them all together in a portrait or as a character, this really helped me solidify my understanding of all the moving parts and create a full character. It's not easy, but the more you do, the better you get. Just keep doing it, one day at a time, one thing at a time, and you will get better. Thanks again for watching, guys. I hope you found this video helpful. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to see when I come up with new stuff. But until next time...